Jesus is the hope of the world, and he established his church to carry that hope into a world that often feels hopeless. When we follow and God works through the church, and the church works. When the church works, lives are changed at home, in the world, and even at work. Join us as we learn to be the church at work. We're going to look at missionaries at work. Here are today's guests. Let's give our guests a warm Blackhawk welcome. Good morning, Blackhawk. I'm Curtis Smith. Great to be with you as we wrap up this 7-week series, The Church at Work. Today we are looking at missionaries at work. I'm going to start with Doug and Lisa Middlebusher. Doug, Lisa, you guys lead our efforts here at Blackhawk to connect out into the mission field. Tell us what that looks like. What are some of the things going on through as we reach out to our community?
Yeah, we have a great privilege and honor to work with 4 local missions here in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And through that, we get a chance to connect people with maybe their gifts or passions and an opportunity to serve, whether it be city life, playing basketball with kids and eating a meal with them, or Caris House providing time with kids to babysit, to maybe hairstylists, and as much providing financial assistance, just meeting with them one-on-one to determine maybe some needs assessments that they need. And so it's just a great opportunity for us as a community to use the gifts that we have.
Lisa, sometimes I think we look at this as volunteering, but it really is, even if it's not going halfway around the world, not maybe that traditional mission trip mindset that we have at work. It's being a missionary.
Yes. I would like to say maybe not volunteerism, maybe missionary. If we can see ourselves as a missionary, where that volunteer word for us kind of is a fearful thing, because we see that as you're stuck in some place for a long, long time, and that's not the case. God doesn't, I can't see God, wanting just for you to be stuck and doing a job dreary. He wants joy, and he has a place for everyone in here, whether it's your favorite thing to do, or maybe it's a sport that you love to do. Well, just find a place where you could do it, to come alongside those that need help. We just all need help. So just find a path and then go find the people. And then God just uses you. I don't know why he wants to, but he wants to use us, and that is such a gift. So instead of making it a chore or sometimes that's the greatest thing that we have, is a fear. Maybe I'm not qualified, or maybe I don't want to get stuck in a time crunch. I know everybody's busy, but God makes time. Somehow, I don't know how he does it, but he makes time, and he brings joy.
Seems like a great time to transition to you, Rod, because you've been volunteering for a long time, inasmuch 10 years, but it's not, as Lisa said, being stuck. It's not a chore. Tell us about what you, or maybe it is, by judging by your face, but tell us about your work at Inasmuch this past 10 years or so.
If you go down, my mic on?
Yeah.
If you go down to the corner of Broadway and Washington Boulevard, any Monday, Wednesday, Friday, around 9 o'clock, you will see a line of 15 to 30 people waiting who have needs. Want food, clothing, bus passes, or some financial. It's not always easy, and it's a little frustrating. I remember Alan Biddle telling me several when, he said, Rod, you're not going to fix them. Just be obedient. Just be obedient. So that's what I have to keep in mind. It's not me.
that's going to change them, excuse me. So I just, and it is a joy. Even though I don't want to go sometimes, every time I go, I'm blessed, I'm thankful.
Dale Johnson, you're in as much as well, and you've that greater good, because sometimes you're there simply to do chores or to help people, but I know you've had the experience of leading people to Christ recently and somewhat regularly. So the work of doing mission work and the work of doing chores, of helping people, really can have a greater good. It can pay off in an eternal way.
Absolutely. Involved in the financial counseling down there. We call ourselves, or they call us, client ministers. And I resisted getting into the financial part for a while because I felt it could be a conflict of interest, you know, of like they might feel, I say yes to this, Jesus, are you going to give me the money I need? And so I've gotten around that by making sure that we care for all that financial stuff and the temporary things first, and then transition into, I'm excited to help you through a temporary situation here, but there's an eternal situation, an eternal need that you have, and I'd love to talk to you about that. And that's absolutely the joy of my life. It has been since way back in 1975, explosion taught through this church. I've just been excited for opportunity to share the Lord. And I don't know if it was my resistance to doing the financial, but since I've been doing that, a greater number of people come to the Lord. Actually, since May, I've had the opportunity to pray personally with 5 different people down there that I believe genuinely received Christ as their Lord and Savior that day. And I'm just one of the client ministers. And
That's awesome.
As you sit there in your cubicle, you can hear other people talking and sharing, and everybody has a different way of doing it, but it's all the Lord and it's not us. I've learned a long time ago, He can do it all, and as soon as we realize that and it's not up to us, we're in a much better position to see God work.
Brent Stockler is with us this morning as well, Clinical Director for Charis House. You've been with the Rescue Mission at Large for about 7.5 years now. Correct. For a year or so. Brent, give us a picture of what is happening at the Charis House as you guys invest into our community.
Yeah. One of the things that I have the opportunity doing as clinical director, and I'll even share that even though God the talent or the abilities with the skill set, I know that it's not my power. It is only through Him that He allows me to do anything. Our mission is to provide through the power of Jesus Christ a home for the homeless, food for the hungry, future. And the piece that I like to speak to when I get the opportunity with the women and sometime with the children is, what does hope look like? As I was reflecting on our 2 songs that we were singing, I'm reminded of an opportunity, and I view it as an opportunity because God could have chose somebody else, but He chose me. We'll figure out why later. But He gave me the opportunity, along with the case manager, to talk to a teenager who was really getting into herself. So it was the opportunity to speak into her life. How does God see you? And the miraculous thing that happened that we know that only God could do was when we were finished talking to her after half hour of the office singing Reckless Love.
Doug and Lisa, we've heard here from several people who are out doing the mission work, and I think Dale kind of spoke to it, Brent did as well, the willingness to go, available, to let God do His work through you can be scary. When people are maybe on the edge of their seat thinking, yeah, I could do this, I have a passion for this, but they don't know how to jump in, encourage them to boldly step into what God may be calling them into. That's a good husband, Doug. Let her have the mic first.
Well, first we are out in the foyer, and we have also an assessment paper, just a 1-page that you can take if you're like, I have no idea what I can do or what I even am passionate about. Maybe take an opportunity to fill that in. We're out there to help you find that place, because there are a lot of opportunities. I have a list of, there's tutors, there's, if you're so There's opportunities to sow at the International House, and I tease Rod, golfing. You love golf. There's an opportunity in golfing. You can.
Where you're going here. Keep
Yes.
going with that.
Yes, Curtis, you can get into golfing. You just find people at the rescue mission. They do a benefit, and they also have where you just take your friends and they put a partner with you, and you just spend the day with them and you get to know the people.
Just a couple things that come to mind too. We have a ministry with Campus Ministries, and there are college kids that come away from family, and I'm getting emotional because I have a college kid, but that's okay. These kids come and they have a Bible study, I think once a week. You could go and sit in on the Bible study and build some relationships and friendships with those kids, and maybe it'll lead to an opportunity to have them in your home because they're not with their families. Again, playing basketball down at City Life. Gosh, there's just so many opportunities. You got more? We could be here all day. Come see us. I'm telling you, we'll get you connected.
Well, we got also prayer. We forget about those. Maybe you can't get out, but there's prayer partners, and all of these 10 of them up later, they all need prayer partners. So get involved that way. We have dance instructors. We have, if you just like to converse with people, there's,
I'm
do
sticking
that
to
one.
golf as a mission work. Lisa mentioned some of the partners that we have. You can see them here on the screen. These are official partners that we have been working with on behalf of Blackhawk, doing the work in the. Again, sometimes we think of mission work as being halfway around the world, maybe a trip, but a lot of times it's just partnering with these organizations doing incredible work in our community. And Rod, a lot of times it is just being available. It's not so much about your ability, because people come into a place like Inasmuch and they have all kinds of different needs, and you've got to be prepared to meet this need or this need or this need. You have no idea what's coming your way, and God is essential.
That's exactly right, Curtis. I'll be driving down there, and I don't know, and Dale is in the same situation. We don't know what these people are going to bring in, what kind of baggage they might have. And I just say, Lord, and again, Alan Biddle will remind me, Rod, you're not going to fix it. Just be obedient. And you have to love them enough to tell them the truth. And it's God leading through these circumstances. And we meet with everyone one-on-one, and we get to share the gospel with them. Probably 80% of the time we deal with their physical needs that they have, whether it's food, clothing, bus pass, and the rest of it's 20% or so sharing the gospel. And that's what's really rewarding. That's the purpose of that ministry.
And Dale, I think sometimes this looks like different phases of life. I know that for you, mission work has changed over the years. You've led trips with young people years ago. Now this is what the mission field looks like for you. Talk about that willingness to stay all in different seasons of life as you change.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and so often we can see one season sort of end and say, gee, I can't really do that anymore, and opening to say, okay, there's something else. But again, I think the key thing is realizing that it's not you. Once you realize that, hey, I can't do that, you're halfway there. Okay, the second half is realizing that, yes, and if he's called you to it and given you a burden for it, then go for it. And yeah, it may change. It may be a raft trip, it may be a youth outing, it may be teaching skiing, you know, whatever it is at your different stage of life, trust the Lord. If you've got the heart for it, the Lord's leading you, realize that the spiritual result's going to be up to him anyway. And that verse that says, you know, his word is going to be faithful. You put the word out and it won't return void.
Who's maybe thinking it should be their career. Your job is mission work. So you step into this every day, 9 to 5, and probably then some. Mm-hmm. How do you stay energized and engaged, and what would you say to someone going into mission work, into the mission field full time?
Well, I think my secret that keeps me charged is I need to be here on Sunday, and then be involved in a life group and getting poured into so that I can pour out. Again, I know it's not me. Prior to being at the Rescue Mission, I worked at the Park Center Mental Health Center, and even there, I tried to sprinkle in a little bit of God, but it's a lot easier now, and just to freely speak and share the gospel. Another way of putting it is to share the gospel at all times and use words only when necessary, to just live it out and just be Jesus. Would be my encouragement to just, when those opportunities come up, and those opportunities may look like they're interruptions, that they're preventing you from getting from point A to point B, that might be the opportunity that God has placed in time to do something, to help in some way.
I was going to say, to get your life group involved, because sometimes it's scary to try a new thing, but if you can find a friend or a life group and serves like a one-time thing, just to get a taste of that down at the Rescue Mission. You can go serve a meal. You could do that at City Life. There's lots of different things. You can do one-time things and just out there. He talked about taking that first step. He said that over and over, and that's what we need to do.
I was going to say, something came to mind when we went with Pastor Bob down at the Rescue Mission. They have a weekly service in the evening. Really encourage people to come and just be a part of that worship service. Whether you jump in and actually end up leading, if you can play an instrument, or you can sing, or if you just want to come and just be a part of that service, just to build those relationships with people that are in need and see where it goes from there.
If you would like to find out ways that maybe you could step into some of these spaces, join with some of these organizations, the Middle Bushers and several of our panel members will be in the foyer after this service, and you can come meet with them and learn how you with some of our mission partners here in our community. Will you thank our panel members for being with us this morning? I'm also struck today as we wrap up a 7-week look at the church at work. Not just today's panel, but all the panel members. A lot of them have really stepped out of their comfort zone to be here on stage with the lights and with a microphone. It's enjoys doing. So I'm very appreciative. It's been a privilege for me to host these panel discussions. And I also want to thank quickly Kevin and Christian and Chip and Katie, our leadership that has not only organized and put this together, but Kevin especially has said, yeah, I'm going to give up some sermon time for 7 straight weeks so that we can look at what the church at work really looks like, so that we can hear from our body and let them do the preaching. So will you join me especially, but all of our leadership, for guiding us through this series. One of the partners that you've heard about here from the Blackhawk stage over the last several months is Fort Wayne United. They have a new 10-point coalition, and they've got a Walk the Talk program that they're launching that's really exciting, and I think it's going to make a tremendous difference in our community. Watch this video to learn a little bit more about what Fort Wayne is right now.
Here 3 years ago, my daughter asked to come here for a bonfire to celebrate her birthday with a bunch of her friends. This is where her life ended. Don't know which way the bullets was flying, but I guess they was flying all over, but I know she took off running or from right here because, like I said, I have her shoes. The police said this is where she was laying at when they found her. Alana would be 20 years old. Alana was a typical kid. She loved basketball. That was her passion. She brought light to a room. My heart.
In this park behind me where kids play and families gather, there have been people who have lost their lives. I'm Pastor Luther Whitfield, Senior Pastor for New Covenant Worship Center and for the Fort Wayne United Clergy Subcommittee. We just recently launched a 10-point coalition that will help us to get our feet on the ground to work and transform this Oxford community.
The 10-point coalition gives to be able to send men out in the community at night, where they will be able to meet people, build relationships, and to keep this community safe.
I've been raised in this community all my life, and I've been a part of the social service network for 5 years. And I've learned that it takes all of us to make a better community.
I'm asking you to join with us, our faith-based partners, to come and help us to join together with these men who will be walking the streets, relationships with people. We want to show this community that they're not alone in this endeavor.
We want to be able to come together in prayer, bringing hope to this community, letting us know that we are all in this together.
We all talk about what we believe. We talk about what we want and desire for our community, safety and prosperity and economic development and empowerment. We invite you to come and walk the talk. Help us to make this community safer by really infusing prayer and Christ into, especially the communities that have lost so many people to homicide and violence.
We ask that you, as faith leaders, people of faith, to join us in this walk so that we can pray for success in the people in this community.
We need to arm ourselves shoulder to shoulder with the clergy committee as we walk the streets.
We want to be able to share with this community that they're not alone in their pain and in their suffering. And what better way to see that is when we're walking together. Reminded in Acts chapter 3 and 9 that he was walking and was praising God, and the people saw it. I want the same for us, that when people see us, they know that God has come to the area and that we're here jointly to make a difference. So join us for our Walk the Talk, and I look forward to seeing you there.
Well, if you can say anything about church today, you can say you have seen to be a light. We believe in a 1-5 vision, we call it, where it starts with John 1:5. The light has entered the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. And so we believe that that starts here in our own 1-5 zip code. 46815 goes across our streets and all around the world. And so you've heard opportunities both locally. We've had Pastor Imad here from Egypt. You're going to hear from him at the end of the service. You don't want to miss what he's got to share with you, one of our newest partnership overseas. And then you've seen local opportunities like Fort Wayne United. Now, I've been a part of Fort Wayne United for a while now and just love how we are getting to be Christ in our community. And so we doing what I think Jesus would always do, which is step into the toughest situations, step into the darkest places in our city where, as an example, homicides and violence reign at times. And so we want to be part of this 10-point coalition by being a faith community that sets a foundation of prayer. And so I want to give you two opportunities. They are going to be on your screen. They are in your notes. They're on our website if you go to blackhawkministries.org. And we're just going to pray. You can do anything, you can pray. And so we want to set a tone, build a foundation for what God's going to do through our Oxford and through our Oxford community. And so we're going to be meeting at Weiser Park at 2 different times. The first one is next Sunday, 28 at 5:30 p.m. And we, as all of the churches at Fort Wayne United and any that want to join in, so you can invite anyone to that, we're just going to gather and pray for the launch of this. Then the next 5 days, we as the churches and walk with some of those people who are going to be walking at night, building relationships and making a difference in that community. So we're going to prayer walk. That's the walk the talk. We go from prayer in the park next Sunday to walk the talk, and the hours will be Tuesday the 30th, 6 to 7 p.m. We'll still meet at Weiser Park, and we'll go and not just talk about what we believe, we're going to walk it out and be Jesus in that community. We're going to pray, we're going to be visible, because I believe that when light enters the darkness, notice. And that's what we're here to do. Aren't you glad to be a part of that kind of church? That is what this series is about. And so I want to invite you to Acts chapter 27 today. As we wrap it up, we're talking about missionaries at work. You've seen missionaries. You're going to hear from some more missionaries as we move forward. But here's the thing. As we do this partnership, this collaboration, this effort in our city, locally and globally, I believe this. So many times, have you ever noticed that churches often seem to compete sometimes? And I got a word for you today. I believe with all of my heart that being a missionary is not a competition. It is a collaboration to fulfill a commission. We're here, and so I'm excited about what God's going to do in our city, but I'm excited about what God's going to do in and through churches coming together, and we're going to be walking with New Covenant Worship Center. I've been able to preach there several times. Pastor Luther has been here several times. have been meeting with a group of people, about 30 people from Black Hawk, about 30 people from New Covenant, on a monthly basis for the last 3 months. Many of you didn't even know that. But we're trying to build a relationship that goes further than just us trading and Luther, but our churches working together, collaborating to fulfill the Great Commission across our streets and around the world. So I want to challenge you to join us in being a missionary to the marginalized. Look at Jesus. I see him stepping into the situations, the people, the problems in his city, in the communities where he traveled. He was a missionary to the marginalized, and God calls us to do the same. And I want to start today 27. We're going to look at Paul. Jesus was the number one missionary, but Paul was probably a close second. Can I get an amen? He was right there behind him. But I want to read from Isaiah 58. You don't have to turn there. It's on your screens. I want to read Isaiah 58 from the New Living Translation, where it says, "Feed the hungry and help the oppressed. Then your light will shine out from the darkness, and the darkness around you will be bright as noon. The Lord will guide you continually, giving you water are dry and restoring your strength." Could you use that today? "You will be like a well-watered garden, like an ever-flowing spring. Some of you will rebuild the deserted ruins of your cities. Then you will be known as a rebuilder and a restorer of homes." That is what I want to be a part of. Are you with me? Paul was a part of that, and he is our missionary. We're looking at a vertical relationship that has a horizontal impact. You've been given opportunities to impact in your world, but I want us to look at how Paul did just that. And so as we look at Paul today, I want to start by going back to Luke's account. Luke wrote the Gospel of Luke, but he also wrote Acts. Acts 27 is where we're at. But to lead up to verse 21, which is where we'll start, you should know what Paul had been going through. Paul had been persecuted and imprisoned and has been on trial for preaching about Jesus. And so he had been on trial in city leader after city official after governmental official, on trial for doing nothing wrong, for preaching the good news of Jesus that had changed his life forever, starting with the Damascus Road. Luke was walking with him and recording all of these. We've looked at his account for several weeks. I feel like I've gotten to know Luke. I don't know about you over these last several weeks as we've looked at his accounts. But in Acts 27, verses 10 and 11, we see that here's what Paul had done. He had appealed to go before Caesar. So he was being sent as a prisoner to go to Italy, to go before Caesar. And so as a prisoner, he was to get on these ships and be transported to Italy. And he tells the people launching, he tells the centurion, he tells the captain, "Hey, you don't want to go that way. I got a bad feeling about this. We don't want to sail from here. It's going to end up creating injury and loss. You don't want to do that." And we find out they go that way anyway, and it leads to some problems. And then as they experience verses 18 through 20, it's kind of like Jonah's story. If you remember Jonah's story, they ended up throwing things overboard to lighten the ship. They actually threw Jonah overboard, ending up, and if you know that story, you know, that was a rough situation for him for a few days. The only thing that didn't get thrown off in this situation was Paul. He stayed on the ship, but they unloaded the ship. But look at verse 20. We'll start in verse 21, but this sets it all up. "And so when neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, and no small tempest lay, all hope of our being saved was lost and abandoned." Was at last abandoned. It was gone. Some of you came in that way today. You feel like all hope for that situation, yep, that one, is abandoned. You feel like all hope is up Paul's story. Paul is in the middle of a miracle. He doesn't know exactly how or what yet. He's in the middle of a miracle, but he's also in the middle of a mess. Did you know that sometimes the two go together? Sometimes your mess channel through which God's going to bring to you the miracle he wants to do. That's where Paul is at. So today, Missionaries at Work, I want to talk to you about being a missionary in the midst of a mess. Did you bring any messes with you today? Don't look at that person a mess. You probably are one too. You probably know several situations you got to walk into that are messy this week, and that leads us to how Paul was a missionary in the midst of a mess. Acts 27, let's look at verse 21. You ready for the word? Verse 21, "Since they had been without food for a long time, Paul stood up among them and said, 'Men, you should have listened to me and not have set sail from Crete and incurred this injury and loss. Yet now I urge you to take heart,'" underline that, It's in here twice. For there will be no loss of life among you, but only of the ship. For this very night there stood before me an angel of the God to whom I belong, and he said, do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand before Caesar. That means, Paul, your life's not going to be over in this battle because you've got a bigger one ahead of you. I'm not done with you yet. Maybe you needed to hear that today too, because life is not done with you. He had a bigger battle ahead. And behold, God has granted you all those who sail with you. So again, so take heart, men, for I have faith in God that it will be exactly told. But, verse 26, we must run aground on some island. And so as you think about your journey, you probably feel like you've run aground on some island several times in your life. You run into as these missionary moments in your life. And who's a missionary in the building? Okay, I got about a quarter of you. My goal is that the rest of you will raise your hands by the end of the message today. And I believe God is sending in your life today some you have some missionary moments that will often come in the midst of a mess. Many of those missionary, miraculous moments where God speaks will come at the worst times possible. So today, my sermon to you is one sentence. One sentence in two parts, straight from this passage, verses 21 through 26. The first part of the sentence is, while you long for a reason. While you long for a reason. Do you ever look for the reasons? Am I in this mess? I prayed for days. I tried to be faithful. I asked you to show up. I asked them to show up. God, why am I in this mess? Please give me just one reason. You ever been there? Well, I personally experienced that, and he gives a little bit of that reason in a sarcastic tone that we'll talk about in a moment. But God doesn't really give him a reason. He doesn't say, I need you to go shipwreck on an island because you're going to meet people there and lead them to Christ and start a church there. He doesn't tell him. Says, you're not going to lose life, but it's going to be bad, Paul. You ever feel like God does that to you? Like, you're going to live through it. I'm not done with you yet, but it's going to be rough. In fact, Jesus said it this way. I'd like the two phrases, take heart. In the world you will have tribulation, but take heart because I've overcome the world. And Paul says the same thing, and sometimes that's all God gives us. I've overcome the world. Trust me. But Paul did know some of the reason. Verses 21 through 22, we see a little of you would say that Paul is probably spiritually superior to you. I would. I mean, he did write part of the Bible, and I just get to read it, so I mean, he's got a pretty good head start on me. So he's up here, right? But as spiritually superior as it would seem that Paul is in the Bible, I love that it captures the sometimes hilarious, real, raw, and nasty stuff that life brings about, even through the people that we revere and look up to, like Paul. Because you know what we learn about Paul? As spiritual he's not above saying, I told you so. Because that's what he does. In the beginning of this passage, he said, we wouldn't be in this mess if you would have listened to me. Well, you knucklehead. Probably didn't say that either. He probably had some other things to do at times. And so Paul is not even above saying, I told you so. But here's the thing. He's on this ship for preaching the gospel. He did nothing wrong. And can I tell you today, sometimes in life, as a pastor, I see it. As a person, I live it. Times where it's like, well, this life of mine is such a mess, I must have done something really bad. Did you know that not every time that you walk into a mess, it's because of something you did or did not do, or something you did wrong? Paul did nothing wrong. He was on the ship as a prisoner, defending this faith that he had come to find in Jesus. But here's the thing. A lot of times we ask for the reason. It's very hard to effectively, efficiently follow Jesus by looking for the reason for every mess that you're in. Some of you know that because you've been living it. It's been a messy life, and you've been asking God for reasons, and it feels like it's met with silence, and you feel like you're getting nowhere, but you're consumed with the reason. Is that such a bad thing? Not often, but sometimes it becomes this consuming drive of ours to know why. And every time we're in a mess is not going to be a time that God gives us all of those reasons, because sometimes we can't even handle it. Sometimes God needs to teach us and build us up in a way during the mess without all of the reasons so that he can do something new in our lives. I love that Paul's in that place. He knew that they made bad decisions, and that got him in a storm on a ship, but he didn't know the whole reason why God would allow it. And so I hear two things in the story. In verse 25, I hear faith. So from Paul, I hear faith. when he's looking for the reason. He said, I have faith in God that it will be exactly as he said. An angel came to me. God sent an angel, and he said, we're not going to die. We're going to live, but it's going to be rough. Verse 26, but I hear faith. I hear faith. I believe. I have faith in this God who about who he is. But number two, I not only hear faith, I hear frustration. Because he says, you knuckleheads, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. You ever say that to people? You say, if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be in this mess. Sometimes you look in the mirror. You, Kevin, we wouldn't be in this mess. I hear the frustration that Paul has, but I also hear faith. And much like it is with being in the midst of a miracle and in the midst of a mess, it's the same thing at times in our life. The most frustrating life will meet the greatest faith moments that you'll ever run into. Sometimes they overlap, faith and frustration. And a lot of times for us, it's still easy to get tempted to hang our hat on finding reasons about why God's doing what he's doing. As a pastor, I'm in a lot of situations, and you are too, because you're people and you're around people like me, where people are suffering, people are hurting, and we're called, I know I'm called, and look to a lot of times as a pastor to speak life and hopefully give hope in the midst of those situations. And you know, I've learned something. A lot of times I'll go to verses like Romans 8:28, and I do believe that that's in the Bible for a reason, and I do believe it's fully true. It says, for all things work together for the good of those who love God according to his purpose. I do believe that. And a lot of times, early days of ministry, I would start with trying to say, well, you know, here's some reasons where you could be going through this, right? But let me tell you something. In your notes, sometimes when you're dealing with a loved one who is suffering, don't look for a reason. They don't need to hear from you a reason. They need reassurance. They need to hear that God is with you, and so am I. And I want to challenge you, if you're walking with somebody who's suffering, start with reassurance. God will provide. He needs you to know. He doesn't need you to be the reason deliverer. If he puts it on your heart, then deliver it by all means. But reassure people that God is for them and with them, and that you are too. That's the greatest present you can give to anybody in your presence. It's that reassurance. And so may we be that kind of people. Paul, verse 26. But nevertheless, we've got to run aground on some island. He's in the midst of a storm because of somebody else's bad decision. Have you ever been in the midst of a storm? Dumb decision. Don't look at them too hard, because I got another question for you. They may be here in the room with you. Have you ever been in the midst of a mess because of your dumb decisions? Yeah, I told you not to look at them, because now they're looking back at you. You made it too. Have you ever been in the midst of a mess because there's this real enemy who works to seek out and to kill and to devour and to make us stumble? This enemy we call the devil works in our lives. It's so true and it's so real. But I will tell you, I think sometimes we give the devil too much credit. We'll just jump to it's a bad situation, so the devil must have done it. Sometimes it's not the devil, it's a decision. And then we get into this wrestling match where we think, well, how much of the cause of this problem was their fault, my fault, the devil did it, or that God allowed it, or that God did it? How much is God in the equation? How much is the devil in the equation? How about me? How about them? And before long, you get consumed in trying to figure out the reason what God's trying to reveal to you in your life. And so here's what I want to tell you today. No matter what the cause, the reason for your mess today, whether it's the devil, whether it's decisions, whether it's them, whether it's you, whether God they played the role. No matter what you feel like today, I want you to know that God is for you and that God is trustworthy. And so here's what I've tried to do. I try no longer to all the time try to figure out whether it was me or them or God or the devil, because is that no matter what percentages of the reason there are in place, that every bit of it had to be sifted through the hands of God before it got to me. And because I trust those hands, because I trust God, I don't care from. I want to find God in the midst of my mess. I want to be that missionary. God will even use other people's bad decisions to lead you to your destiny. Think of Joseph. He was mistreated by his brothers. He ended up having the upper hand on his. You know, you meant it for evil, but God, he meant it for good. So was it evil or was it good? Yes, because my God can take the biggest messes, the most evil things, and show up and transform to bring good and infuse good into an evil situation, no matter who made the bad decisions, no matter how big of a mess you find yourself in. So I find myself longing for a reason. While I long for verses 23 through 26, God will give you a revelation. While you long for a reason, God will give you a revelation. God wants to reveal himself, show himself to you in the midst of the reasons that you're searching, that you're looking for. Paul doesn't get a reason from God. He doesn't get all this outline of exactly why God's doing it the way he's doing it, but he does give him a revelation. Verse 23, you see that an angel came. An angel came and God revealed himself. A who showed up while Paul was wondering what he was in the middle of. And today I want you to know that this revelation that God wants to give you, because look at me for a minute. Listen, he wants to reveal himself to you today. Listen, will you hear him? But you need to know that the revelation he wants to give to you today, it might not include all the reasons you're looking for. But what you'll find is if you'll understand who God is, the reasons won't matter near as much as they used to. Because you're in the hands of a God you can trust. That's what Paul is showing us in this place. I believe if we stay stuck in the reason, we can often miss God's revelation, what he wants to show us, what he wants to reveal us about himself. A lot of times we feel like everything. How many of you admit, like I got to have all my ducks in a row first? You're like, this, okay, 2 of you. The rest of you are lying because I know there's more of you out there. You want to have it all figured out. We say, yes is the answer, Lord. Now what's the question? But you go, well, before I give you my yes, with the question, I'll do all the numbers. I'll come back and give you my answer based on the facts and the research that I do. But God says, no, I want your yes on the table. And in your notes, I challenge you this week to live in a new way, to live in a way that says, I don't have to fully in order to obey immediately. I can obey now even though I don't have all of the numbers, even though I don't know what lies ahead. I can trust God. If he's in it, it's okay. Understanding can wait, but cannot. That's what Paul is living out as a missionary, even in the middle of his mess. But with that revelation comes a responsibility. And I think that responsibility for us today, because who's a missionary again? Just checking. I got a little bit more, still a little ways to go. I can preach all day, so until we get to our goal here. Some of you are just asleep, and we'll get you there in a minute. But here's what I think our responsibility is with this revelation of God. Called to operate. We're not called to operate based on reason all the time. Does God give us reason? Does God give us a clear head? Does God give us common sense? Absolutely. Should you use those things? Yes, please do. You could avoid a lot of those talking about if you use the tools God's given you, to use the reason, to use the common sense. However, sometimes the reason and the revelation go head to head. They go toe to toe. You can always trust God. That's why I try not to operate based on reason, because it makes me inconsistent. Goes up and it goes down because sometimes I know, sometimes I don't know. Sometimes it's a mess, sometimes it's not. Sometimes I feel like doing it and sometimes I don't. But here's what happens. When I operate based on God's revelation, based on who he is and who he's revealing me to be and who he's making me into, knowing my identity in him, I operate based on God's revelation. I go from inconsistency to a consistent contentment that transcends any circumstance. I want that. I want that kind of missionary journey. That's what Paul, he said, I've learned to be content in whatever state I'm in. How about a shipwreck, Paul? Here he is at the end of his life. He doesn't have much time left. And he sees the writing on the wall. He knows where this is heading. Life doesn't know what it's going to look like. But he stayed the course because he was content and he operated based on who God is. And today, I know who my God is. Do you know who he is? He's the first and the last. He's the author and the finisher. He's the bread of life. He is the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through him. He's the only one who can bring comfort into this circumstance that you face. He is the Son of God who came and became flesh and dwelt among us so that we could know him, so that today, no matter what your mess is, you can be a missionary because we ran into the missionary who is Jesus, who met us in our mess. My God, that's the missionary who gave me a blueprint to go out and now be a missionary. Going back to these verses, this sums up the whole sermon for you. So those of you who didn't raise your hand a minute ago, maybe you've checked out, this is it. About it's in your notes. I got a word for you. You may not know why, but you can always know who. You may not know why you're in the middle of the mess that you're in. Story, my heart would break for you, but you can always know who. Your God loves you. He's not done with you yet. You know who He is. Hang your hat on that. Trust Him to reveal you, regardless of what reasons you find. And then you'll find what happened with Paul. God will reveal Himself in verse 25. I have faith in this God. It will be exactly as He said it will be. But we do have to run aground on some island. I can still be a missionary in the midst of my mess. I want to ask you to bow your heads with me this morning, reflect on that very thing. And as we think about that today, I want to ask you to consider how God is asking you to be a missionary. You're going to hear in just a moment. You don't want to miss out on that. But here's the thing you don't want to miss out on the most today. Some of you, today is the day that I believe you're going to nail down this salvation thing that has been evading you for so. You felt like, I got to get everything straightened out first. I got to have all the reasons first. And God, I know you're revealing yourself to me. But today is that day. Don't wait any longer. So today, I want to challenge you. Nobody's looking around. Most important thing you'll ever do is surrender to Jesus. And some of you are saying, I don't know how to do it. I don't know what it looks like. And I need you to lead me in a prayer. And I believe your heart is screaming that prayer. I'm not going to lead you in a prayer, but I'm going to tell you what the gospel is. Jesus could never pay by dying that brutal death on a cross that we commemorated and celebrated today as we partook of the Lord's Supper. He paid the price you couldn't pay. After living the sinless life you couldn't live, so that you today could sit here and know that He paid the price, but it didn't stop there, that He rose from the dead. He is alive, and with that came the victory over the sin that separates you from God. Separated from God. Yes, you're unworthy, but you're not coming to Him based on your worth. You're coming to Him based on what Jesus already did. You don't have to fight for that victory. Jesus already won it. Stop putting it off. Watching us online, and you've been waiting, you think nobody knows about you. God knows. He's speaking to you now. You don't have to be in a church building. He wants you to be saved today. If you're sitting here, will you cry out to Him right now? Don't wait any longer. From your words, your heart. Nobody's looking around. It's just you and me and Jesus. Nobody's going to pull you out of here, but I do want to do two things. I want to pray for you, and I want you to hear some next steps in a moment from Curtis when he comes up. If that is you, I want to start by praying for you. If that's you, you said today is that day. I didn't know when I walked in that I had it nailed down, but now I do. If that is you, would you slip your hand up right now? Say, pray for me, Pastor. Today is the day of my salvation. Who would say today is that day? Anybody? Wave me down if I miss you. Who would say, I gave in this building today? Anybody? Who would be here and say, today is the day that God has turned a corner, a chapter in my book, in my story of being a missionary, and I've got a specific step to take this week to be a better missionary, to follow after Jesus, to have Him revealed to me more? Who would say, I've got a step God's put on my heart? I see you, all over the building, all over the building. Lift your hands high. Keep them up. Thank you for your honesty and your truth. You can put your hands down. God, thank you for those who've responded to the Word and those who are watching us online. Who knows what you're doing all throughout the world. God, that's what happens when we are missionaries at work. We get to be the church. We're not called just to go to church. Be the church. Thank you for those who get that. Thank you for those who are living that. Thank you for your Word. Today we worship and we celebrate the name above every name. We thank you for Jesus, and we ask all of this in His holy, powerful, matchless name. And everybody say, celebrate God's Word. Let's worship together.